Hello friends, and welcome back to the channel, where today I'm going to walk you through how I completed path number 2 of the Epoch of Pain quest using this team here on screen: Ironheart, Sentry, and Deathless She-Hulk. All these champions are at rank 3. Now, similar to the other videos, the goal here is not to give you an exhaustive account of every single attempt at every fight, so I am only going to show you one attempt per fight, the goal being just to give you an idea of how to play this fight with the champs that I'm using, and we'll also talk through some alternate champs in each class for every fight as well. Now, before we get into this fight, let's talk for a quick moment about the global node, because it is going to change how you make up your team and how you approach this entire path. The node is called Death by Debuffs, and it basically says that the only way that your champion can deal damage to the defender is by placing any non-stun debuff on them. So non-damaging or a damage over time effect doesn't matter, as long as it's a debuff and a non-stun debuff. And every time you do this, you're going to deal 2% of the defender's health flat in damage. You can see some of the red numbers here as I hit into Nebula and place debuffs with Sentry. Now, the key here is that you want to slow down your combos when you do this, because there is kind of like a built-in timer, a cooldown timer here. So like with Sentry, for example, a full 5-hit combo at the slowest possible speed, you're going to get 3 debuffs to count towards that damage, and then you need a total of 50 placed over the course of the fight in order to KO the defender. So for this path, you really want to focus on champions who can consistently place a lot of debuffs, and there's a lot of them in the science class and a few in the tech class, which we'll talk about as well. Alright, let's start off today with the first fight against Nebula. Nebula has 2 different modes that she switches between every few seconds. The first mode that she starts out in is a mode where if you hit her block, she's going to place a shock debuff on you, and then after a little bit, she's going to switch into mode where she goes fully unblockable. Now, the other node that she has on her is a node where she is going to have a very high chance to auto-block you and resist your heavy attacks unless you have 6 or more buffs on you. So Sentry is really, really good here. He's one of the few science champs who has easy access to buffs, and he gets them quite easily at the start of the fight. You just have to do normal basic combos into her while she's stunned in order to build up 6 or more, and then the auto-block is basically turned off for the rest of the fight. Now, from here, there are kind of 2 different ways you can play this fight with Sentry. You can do what I'm doing here and actually go through his normal phases and try and ramp him up and get additional persistent charges for him. If you are okay doing this, I would highly recommend it, because eventually the goal is for later on the path, you really want to have 6 or more persistent charges. That's going to unlock one of Sentry's abilities where he can have access to a passive stun on a heavy charge, similar to like America Chavez or Dr. Doom or Gladiator, and that is going to make 2 fights on this path a lot easier. Now, that being said, if you're really not comfortable ramping up Sentry, what you want to do is just stay in the base mode and just never use a special 1 or a special 2. And what that's going to do is that is never going to convert your Bulwark buffs into Bulwark passives. Then you never have to worry about possibly triggering the auto block again before you get those buffs back. The special 3 is not going to convert your buffs into passives. It's not going to switch you into the next mode, but it will give you a hefty amount of regen buffs. So you can use that kind of like as an escape card. If you take a couple hits, take a couple shocks by accident, or take some unblockable hits to the face, that regen can really save you. So kind of 2 different ways to play this again with Sentry, depending on your comfort level with him. Alright, let's quickly cover some of the other good options for this fight. In the tech class, we have Howard the Duck. Use the manual mash, tap the screen as he's running in, that'll give you a bunch of armor ups. Then you can parry in heavy for a bunch of furies, that'll turn off the auto block, and the armor breaks and the heal blocks on the special 1 are going to provide the debuffs that you need. With Ironheart, you want to parry and medium in the shock phase to apply debuffs. It's unlikely that you're going to get enough armor ups with her to counteract the auto block. Omega Sentinel, same thing, medium. She might get enough armor ups to counteract the node, but it's going to take some work. And then similar story with Scorpion and Photon. With Scorpion, go into Rupture mode, parry medium, and then let the debuffs do their work. Photon, same deal, parry and medium to place your debuffs. Any of those champions should work fine. Alright, next up on the path is NORTHSTAR. This is a fight that I think the global node makes a lot easier. Now, the main node in this fight is a node where you can only use special attacks after either your dash attack or punishing his specials or his heavy attacks. And the problem there is that after his special attacks, he gets an untouchable passive, so if you don't have a way of countering miss, you won't be able to punish his special attacks at all. In addition, he also has Bubble Shield, so you really can't afford to be block baiting a bunch of heavy attacks because his basic combos have so many hits in them that you're almost certainly going to be taking some unblockable hits and have like negative block proficiency before long. Now the good news here is that if you have Ironheart, you have probably the best overall counter to this fight. Ironheart has easy access to debuffs for the global node on both of her medium attacks, and there's enough space in between them on her combo for you to guarantee that both of them get placed. With 5 or more debuffs on NORTHSTAR, you're going to gain the tracking passive which counters miss, and that enables you to easily punish his specials with a medium attack, go right into your special 1, which places additional debuffs on him for some damage. And then lastly, with tracking active, she also turns off Bubble Shield. So you notice here, we have the red shield icon on us with the number 2. We are not gaining any additional Bubble Shield charges whenever we block either his basic attacks, his special attacks, or whatever. So no worries there. And then finally, if he does go unblockable during one of his special attacks, Ironheart can block unblockable specials from mutants. So she's really like a hard counter to almost everything going on in this fight. So now with Ironheart or any other attacker really, you really want to avoid getting cornered into your own wall, because if you do that, there's really nowhere for you to go. So if you feel like you're getting cornered, start saving up your power, fire off your special 3 to create space. You can do it like right after a dash attack, and he won't punish you for it, obviously. Now let's talk quickly about some other counters to this fight. In the tech class, we have Omega Sentinel. Omega Sentinel has access to a tracking debuff via her pre-fight menu, which can also enable her to bypass the effects of miss. So what you want to do with her here is again do like parry medium medium, or do a full combo medium light 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 medium. Make sure that you have one of those tracking debuffs on him at all times, and then you can safely punish his special attacks. Now Omega Sentinel doesn't have a way of countering Bubble Shield, so you do have to keep an eye on your parries. Make sure that you don't parry too much, and when he's about to go unblockable, you're prepared for it. Shuri is also a very good option in the tech class. If you block her parry enough, she can go untouchable on her heavy charge. That should help you negate some of the Bubble Shield damage, and then she has access to a lot of shock debuffs as well. Quicksilver has an anti-miss mechanic in the science class that you can use with enough momentum, but I think Photon is probably the best science option here. Her medium attacks can't miss, so you can safely punish his special attacks with the medium, or if you're in pure light form, you can just do a full hit combo because none of your attacks can miss, and she has access to a lot of debuffs and can whittle down his health pool pretty quickly. With Luke Cage or Deathless She-Hulk, you really just want to play around the nodes or rely on your debuffs to get his health pool down. Alright, next up is Destroyer, and this is another fight that really synergizes well with the Death by Debuffs node. So recall that Destroyer has that like inevitable power gain. When he reaches 100 of those destruction charges, he's going to get a power gain passive, and if you don't have a way of countering that, it's almost certainly going to give him a special 3, and you're probably going to take a ton of damage or die. Now in this fight, you do have a way of slowing down his destruction charges. That's why you're rooted on his special 1. Successfully triggering dexterity against his special 1 prevents him from gaining destruction charges on that hit of the special, so it's really like a beneficial node. Now, Sentry, another really strong option for this fight, but again, anybody who is placing debuffs is going to have a good time here because non-damaging debuffs, again, are going to prevent him from getting that power gain for as long as possible, and they're going to be dealing damage due to the Death by Debuffs global node. The reason I like Sentry for this fight in particular is because he has easy access to Wither debuffs. So regardless of how you want to play Sentry in this fight, the first thing that you should do is switch him from his base mode into his yellow mode. And you're going to do that by using either a special 1 or a special 2 when he has 20 of his green bulwark buffs. And that's going to switch you into his next mode. In the yellow mode, all of his basic attacks, or his medium and lights rather, are going to be placing 10% Wither debuffs. So not only again are those going to deal damage because of the Death by Debuffs node, but those are also going to keep a lockdown on his power gain. Because as I said at the start of this fight, the power gain really does feel like inevitable in this fight. So that you can delay it, but you really can't prevent it totally. With the Wither debuffs that Sentry has, you can effectively turn it off completely. It makes him like an almost brain dead counter to this fight. Now with Sentry, once you're in that yellow mode, you can kind of take one of two different approaches to the rest of the fights, very similar to what we talked about with the Nebula fight a few minutes ago. Now the easier, the simpler approach is just to stay in that yellow mode, continuously reapplying all those Wither debuffs, and never using a special 1, never using a special 2, using the special 3 only if you need access to that regen. And those Wither debuffs are going to keep a total lockdown on his power gain. You're going to be safe from the special 3, and you'll be dealing a lot of damage via the global node. Now the other option is to do what I'm kind of doing here, and that is continually cycling through Sentry's modes in order to gain additional persistent charges. And again, I talked about this a little bit at the start of the Nebula fight, where you really want 6 or more persistent charges with Sentry if you can get them. And the good news is that this is a much longer fight than the other ones with Sentry, so you really have a golden opportunity here to cycle through his modes many, many times in order to build up a bunch of persistent charges. I actually think that at the end of this fight, I have 7 persistent charges on the screen, and then I get an 8th one by winning the fight. So more than enough to cover me for the Adam Warlock and the AEGON fights, which we'll talk about shortly, but also a little bit of a safety net. If I were to die once or twice against those fights, I still have 6 or more of those persistent charges, giving me access, again, to that passive stun on the heavy charge. Which approach you choose is obviously up to you. I think it's going to be a little bit faster if you take like the easy route, but again, it is a little bit riskier. I feel like it's worth the risk to go ahead and ramp up Sentry. I probably wouldn't recommend doing it if you aren't like familiar with how he works, because he can be like a little bit tricky to keep debuffs paused and work your way through the phases, and there is a good chance that you'll be without those Wither debuffs for a small portion of the fight. So if you're comfortable with Sentry, I would highly recommend you do the ramp up. If not, don't worry about it. You'll be just fine for the rest of the fights. The heavy charge stun just makes them a little bit easier. So let's talk through some alternate options that I have listed here. In the tech class, pretty much the same champions that I've talked about in the previous fights. And the focus here, again, is on champions who can place a lot of debuffs to deal the most damage via that global node. Now, Ironheart doesn't have access to non-damaging debuffs, so you really have no way of turning off the power gain completely other than by dexing his special 1, so that power gain is probably going to trigger at some point, and unless he's feeling super cooperative and throwing his special 1 or a special 2 on the way to 3 bars, you're probably going to have to tank a special 3, and that's the case with a lot of these champions. Shuri and Omega Sentinel kind of have the same issues. Now with Photon and Luke Cage and Deathless She-Hulk and Silk, all of them are more focused on non-damaging debuffs, so you're going to have a much longer period of time available to you in this fight before you trigger the power gain, and it may not ever trigger at all. So I would recommend a Science Champ if at all possible for this fight, but again, if you have Sentry, if you have him ranked up, he's probably my favorite option for it. Alright, next up is Photon. This is a very tricky fight. It's all about managing power gain, and do you know how to deal with her special attacks in pure light form. So at the start of the fight, you're going to have this permanent power gain passive. You can see it's giving you a pretty steady trickle of power here. If at any point you get to 3 bars of power, you're probably going to die. If you get to 0 power, you're also going to die pretty much immediately as well. So the way that you do this is that you need to manage your power gain by hitting your her block with your first light attack, and that's going to apply a petrified debuff to you, which will slow down and reverse the power gain. So what you want to do here is throw a special attack, and you can't throw another special attack until that yellow timer is off. If you do throw a special attack before the timer goes away, you're going to take degen. So what you want to do here is throw the special attack, and then kind of manage your own power gain by hitting her block once. And ideally, when you push her into pure light form, you want her below a bar of power so you can just kind of like wait it out. If you push her into pure light form and she has a special 1, hopefully you know how to properly avoid that special attack. You can block the first hit, dex the second one, and then you need to parry the last hit because otherwise it'll be unblockable. And then if you push her to a special 2 in pure light form, you're probably going to die because you can't dex her beams and they're all unblockable, and it's going to be a huge mess here. So pretty much anyone works for this fight. I'm using Ironheart here just because I like having access to the miss counter so that I can safely parry her and hit her into her that way. But again, managing the power gain and knowing how to deal with her special attacks is the most important thing here. Now, other good options here, Omega Sentinel. I did this fight with Omega Sentinel when it first came out. Use the tracking debuff similar to what you would do with NORTHSTAR. That gives you a little bit of a safety net if you parry her. Shuri, again, places a lot of debuffs, can possibly go untouchable, but again, Photon can counter miss, so there's not really a safety net there. With Science, you can use Photon against herself. Luke Cage, Sentry also works here, Soak, and in those champions, again, you're really relying heavily on that death by debuffs node in order to deal as much damage as possible before she can KO you. So not necessarily needing to use your special attacks, but it's still very important that you manage your power gain with that Petrified debuff, because again, if you get to 3 bars of power or 0 power, it's basically instant death. Speaking of death, I died here doing about 2/3. No worries though. Alright, next up we have Adam Warlock at fight number 5, and this is a fight that can potentially roadblock you if you don't have the right kind of attacker on your team. So if you're watching this video and you haven't yet gone into your path, make sure that your team has at least one champion who can gain 3 or more buffs, because with the buffed up node, you will be dealing no damage to Adam Warlock, even from the death by debuffs node. So essentially Adam Warlock is going to be totally indestructible unless you have a champion who has access to 3 or more buffs. So if you are already in this path and you don't have a champion who fits that description, I'm really, really sorry, but you're going to have to restart the path because you have no way of dealing any damage at all to Adam Warlock. Now that being said, Sentry, and again, a really good option for this fight. I talked at length in this video about ramping him up to give him enough persistent charges to get access to that heavy stun after the first medium. And the reason why it makes this fight a lot easier is because every time that Adam Warlock uses a special attack, you have a short window of time in which you need to strike him with a heavy attack or a special attack, and that places a soul barb on him. If you fail to do so, the soul barb instead gets placed on you, and since you are guaranteed to have a champion with buffs, that soul barb is going to kill you pretty much immediately. With Sentry, you have 14, 15, 20 buffs even. That soul barb is going to be just an absolute run killer for you. Now the soul barb, putting it on Adam by striking him with a heavy or a special attack isn't actually going to deal damage to him, so you're really just trying to prevent it from being placed on you. Now the ideal rhythm you want to get into in this fight with any attacker is by pushing Adam repeatedly to his special 2 and then using your heavy attack into his pod as he lands, just like you're going to see me do right here. And that counts as striking him after his special attack, which is going to successfully place the soul barb on him, as you can see here. Now there is a very small chance that you can get stunned by doing this. Adam Warlock is like Sig 1 in this fight, so I think the chance to get stunned is only like 10%. So if you are using a champion like Sentry with multi-hit heavies, you do have additional chances to get stunned. With Sentry you have the indestructible, so you can afford to take 1 or 2 of those and still survive the fight, but something you need to be aware of regardless here. Now if he has a special 1 available and chooses to use that instead, you can counter with your own special 1 if you know the special 1 punish. That's pretty easy. The other node that you want to be focused on here is Power Alternator, which is that purple timer on him. So if that timer expires and you have more power than Adam does, all of your power is going to be drained and transferred to him. So you really do need to be worried about using your special attacks pretty quickly, because if you're holding on to your power and that node triggers, it's going to give him a special 3 and then you're going to die immediately. So you really want to use your specials judiciously. Make sure that when you're using them, it's either to punish his special 1 or just dump power just to dump power. Now the heavy stun after the meeting with Sentry kind of just gives you an extra option. If you really don't feel comfortable doing the heavy into the pod, you can just block bait a heavy attack, watch out for the unblockable in that instance, and then do a medium attack, charge your heavy before the timer goes off, and that'll count as striking him and transfer the soul barb to him. So again, just giving yourself a bunch of extra options for this fight. Now let's talk through some of the alternate options here, and with most of these you're going to play this pretty much the same way. Keep pushing him to his special 2, heavy attack into his pod in order to prevent the soul barb from triggering on yourself. Now, first option I have listed in the tech class is Omega Sentinel. Easy access to buffs just by repeatedly doing medium combos. She can build up her armor ups that way. My buddy Campo has a solo of this fight with a 6-star Ascended Omega Sentinel that is really, really impressive. Highly recommend you go check that out if you haven't seen it already. I'll probably link it in the top right of the screen here. Again, Howard the Duck, another champ who has easy access to buffs and can do enough damage, apply enough debuffs in this fight to get it done. Ironheart, really good. Make sure that you're doing a lot of light combo enders to guarantee extra arm reps for yourself in order to keep enough up to counter buffed up. In the science class, there is really nobody else that I can recommend for this fight other than Sentry, because Sentry is really the only science champ who can gain enough buffs in order to deal any sort of damage in this fight. So if you don't have a Sentry ranked up, I would highly recommend, first of all, that you rank up Sentry. If not, you're going to have to use one of the other options, but I really think Sentry is one of the best, if not the best option for this fight. As we finish up this fight, I do again want to stress something that I said earlier, which is that, you know, ramping up Sentry all the way up to 10 persistent charges is really not necessary. In a normal quest or, you know, a mode like Incursions, this is going to drastically increase his damage output, but with the global node here, it really doesn't work that way. So the only point in ramping up Sentry is if you want to take advantage again of that heavy stun after the medium attack. So if you have no interest in that, don't worry about it. Just stay in the base mode, stay in the yellow mode, and just repeatedly use your basic attacks. There's really no need to do anything else extra fancy. So we're about to finish this fight up here. Really happy with this solo with Sentry. And then we'll move on to AEGON, which is probably one of my least favorite fights in this entire quest. Maybe my top 2 least favorite fights is this AEGON here. So this fight, very, very annoying. You need to heavy attack after his specials, just like you do with Adam Warlock. However, if you let him hit into your block, he's got 1,000 combo, and he's going to be doing a ton of damage into your block. So much so that like 1 or 2 blocked hits is likely to kill you. So the way to do this is that you want to make sure that you are continuously intercepting him, and intercepting him is going to give you access to a reinforce and a bulwark, so that'll prevent him from going unblockable, and that'll increase your block proficiency to like a silly amount, and that'll enable you to survive a bunch of blocked hits from him. So the ideal rotation here is keep intercepting him, get that reinforce and the bulwark. You can see those 2 passes on me now. Bait out a special attack, and then you need to heavy attack after his special attack. So again, Sentry's heavy attack charge, really, really useful here because you can bait out either of his special attacks, punish them with a medium, and immediately charge your heavy attack in order to turn off the node. Otherwise, you're going to have to be stuck baiting out heavies like this. You can possibly get rooted from the cement shoes node. It's just really, really messy here. So the way that I'm kind of playing this with Sentry is I'm not really focused so much on intercepting because I know that regardless of whatever special he throws, I have an easy way of punishing hit and also triggering the heavy attack. So with any other champ that I have listed at the top here, you really do need to focus on playing into the nodes because again, those blocked hits are going to be absolutely killer. I actually think that's what ends up killing me in this fight as well. I take like a blocked hit or 2 without having those passes on me, and they kill me immediately here. So remember that, AEGON is going to be shrugging off your debuffs, but the application of them is what is doing the damage via the global node. So you really don't need them to stick. You just need them to apply initially, and then you'll be doing the damage here. Quickly, let's cover the other options. Again, they're all focused on debuffs. So in the science class, it's the usual suspects: Photon, Deathless She-Hulk, Quicksilver, Luke Cage. All of them are going to have to play into the node, apply a lot of debuffs in order to whittle down his health pool. Omega Sentinel can also do this fight. Stick to mediums. Again, you do have to focus on intercepting to keep up that reinforce and bulwark passive. Howard and Ironheart can also do this fight in similar ways. Folks, that's going to do it for the Path 2 video. I sincerely hope it was helpful for you. Please remember to hit like, subscribe if you haven't already, share this video with anybody who might be struggling with this path, and as always, thank you very much for watching. We'll see you again next time.